All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're tackling a massive 50-year-old mystery about human consciousness. We're going to dive into some truly fascinating research from the world of information dynamics that honestly radically redefines how our brains process reality. It is a completely fresh way of looking at perception, so let's just jump right in. Okay, think about this. Back in 1983, a scientist named Benjamin Libet ran a pretty groundbreaking experiment. He figured out that if you directly stimulate a human brain, it takes about 400 milliseconds for that physical signal to actually register as a conscious thought in the person's mind. That is nearly half a second of absolute silence between a physical event happening and you actually realizing it.
And here's the thing, over the last half-century, that exact delay window has been confirmed over and over again. Whether we're talking about visual masking or complex decision tasks, this 300 to 500 millisecond delay consistently shows up. But here's the wild part. Neuroscience has never actually been able to explain why your brain has this specific built-in lag. I mean, why 400 milliseconds? Most existing theories just kind of redescribe the delay without explaining the actual math behind it.
Well, a new paper proposes a really radical solution, using a framework called information dynamics. This model basically says, hey, we need to stop looking at the brain as some isolated, standalone computer that just crunches data. Instead, they argue we should view the brain more like an antenna or a transceiver. Think of it as a device actively communicating across a boundary, exchanging information between our physical real-world space and a hypothetical underlying virtual space.
To really picture this, the researchers built out a three-layer model. Up at the very top, we've got the application layer. This is the tangible stuff we can easily see and measure. It represents our actual biological brain, the neural activity we can pick up with electrodes, and all those behavioral experiments we run. Basically, it's the physical hardware level. Then, if we drop down to the very bottom, we hit the infrastructure layer. This represents that hypothesized virtual space. And this is where it gets a little mind-bending. This virtual space has no temporal dimension. It is totally non-local and instantaneously connected. So, processing down here doesn't take time the way it does in our physical reality. Information pattern matching happens instantly, zero lag. The crucial bridge connecting these two worlds is the middle platform layer. This layer essentially sets up the geometric rules for how our real-world brain couples with that instant virtual space. According to the model, this virtual space has a universal geometric constant, specifically a curvature, or K, equal to 1/4. You can think of this 1/4 curvature as a strict bandwidth limit dictating exactly how information passes back and forth. To really grasp how the brain acts as a transceiver, we actually need to draw out the processing that happens between this virtual and real space. Think of it like a computer network. The human brain has a baseline sampling clock driven by its neural oscillations, specifically our gamma waves. That clock ticks about once every 10 milliseconds. So the brain, kind of like a cosmic Wi-Fi router, pings the virtual space. But because of that 1/4 curvature limit we just talked about, it takes a very specific, measurable amount of time to push data through that connection.
Let's literally map out this communication time breakdown step by step. Step 1, the brain encodes and uploads the signal, which mathematically takes about 40 milliseconds given our bandwidth limit. Step 2, the virtual space matches this pattern instantly, so that takes exactly 0 milliseconds. Step 3, the virtual space projects that matched info back, and our brain takes about 100 to 150 milliseconds to decode and integrate the download into what we actually experience as a conscious thought.
So, when you draw out that entire virtual real communication loop and add it all up, the 40 millisecond upload, the instant 0 millisecond match, and the 100 to 150 millisecond download, a single sample encode readout cycle of this brain transceiver takes exactly 150 to 200 milliseconds. That right there is the baseline working tempo of human perception. It's essentially your brain's personal refresh rate. Now, what's truly fascinating is seeing how this single baseline rule scales up in the real world. The researchers mapped out how this exact 150 to 200 millisecond cycle perfectly explains three completely different categories of perception experiments. The brain just slightly modifies how it uses that baseline cycle depending on the specific type of signal it's trying to process. Let's look at category A. This represents strong, simple signals. Think of a sudden, bright flash of light or a really loud tone. The signal-to-noise ratio here is excellent. Because it's so clear, the brain only needs one single communication cycle to perceive it. And, perfectly aligning with decades of experimental data, human reaction times to these simple stimuli clock in right exactly at that 150 to 200 millisecond baseline.
But right here is where that 400 millisecond mystery gets completely solved. Category B covers things like Libet's direct brain stimulation. That signal is artificial and it's weak. A single ping just isn't enough to cross the threshold into our consciousness. So the brain essentially has to retransmit the signal to the virtual space 2 or 3 times just to confirm it. And guess what? 2 to 3 cycles of 180 milliseconds each perfectly equates to that mysterious 400 to 500 millisecond delay.
Then we have category C, which is all about complex semantic judgments, like trying to recognize a highly detailed scene. In this case, the brain takes in a massive amount of visual info in parallel, but it immediately hits a bottleneck against the incredibly narrow serial bandwidth of our conscious output. The information literally has to queue up. It's kind of like trying to buffer a 4K video on a terrible internet connection, which extends the processing delay anywhere from 500 up to 750 milliseconds.
So the absolutely crucial takeaway from this explainer so far is this. The delay in our consciousness isn't because the universe is somehow slow to process our thoughts. That lag originates entirely from our biological hardware's ping rate. It's simply the physical time required for our brain to couple with reality's underlying information layer.
So what happens if we push that biological hardware to its absolute limit? Let's talk about what happens to this virtual real communication loop during a near-death experience, or NDE. The researchers actually applied their model to clinical EEG recordings of terminally ill patients in their final moments, and the way the data fits the theory is incredible.
When you look at those EEG recordings, they show that within 30 seconds of cardiac arrest, the dying brain enters a state the researchers call critical resonance mode. Its gamma waves, remember that's our internal sampling clock, surge in power to 2 or 3 times their normal waking level. And the frequency limit? It absolutely skyrockets, tripling from around 40 Hz all the way up to 150 Hz.
In this incredibly intense, critical state, the brain's normal bandwidth limit is basically blown wide open. It gets flooded with non-local, global information from the virtual space. And since the virtual space has no time dimension, the brain downloads this unprecedented intensity of information all at the exact same time. This actually provides a brilliant physical explanation for those timeless, panoramic life reviews that NDE survivors consistently report. Now, what makes this heuristic model so robust is that it isn't just a convenient way to explain human quirks. It accurately backward fits the perceptual delays of other animals too, like rats, macaques, and even crows. It links their unique gamma frequencies directly to their specific perceptual delays.
But a truly good scientific model has to make testable predictions, right? Well, the researchers offer a highly specific one for chimpanzees. Based on genetic similarities, they predict a chimp's single communication cycle takes 16 to 190 milliseconds, creating a strict reaction time window of 180 to 220 milliseconds. This gives us a clear, unfitted future experiment that could either completely validate or totally falsify their entire geometric theory.
Ultimately, this entire model really reshapes how we view reality itself. It suggests that consciousness isn't just some binary on or off switch where humans have it and a rock doesn't. Instead, consciousness is a continuous spectrum. It depends entirely on the complexity of a physical system's feedback loops with the virtual space and the specific timescale at which it can process that feedback. Which leaves us with a truly mind-bending question to wrap up on. If our 150 to 200 millisecond delay is literally just our biological bandwidth limit, is our entire human reality, our every conscious thought, and our very perception of time passing just the artifact of the specific router speed at which we download the universe? Yeah, it's a profound thought to sit with. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning how you perceive the world around you.